A market woman is paid to assassinate President Ibrahim Trrowé, but the truth is uncovered before it's too late. The hands that carried more than fruit. The sun hung heavy over the Ouagadougou market, its light dancing off the piles of mangoes, tomatoes, and yam laid out like treasure. The scent of charcoal smoke and ripe fruit filled the air as people bustled through narrow paths between stalls, voices calling out prices, children laughing, radios playing old songs. In the center of it all stood a woman named Mariam. She looked ordinary, head wrapped in faded ankara, hands tough from work, her eyes alert but tired. To the others, she was just another vendor. No one knew what she carried hidden beneath her table. No one knew her mission, but Mariam knew. She had been paid in cash, thick and dirty, handed to her in a quiet corner of the city by a man in sunglasses who never gave his name. The instructions were clear. Ibrahim Trrowé was visiting the market today, walking among his people as he often did. No guards in sight, no parade, just a man with his hands in his pockets, smiling, buying food, shaking hands. The president who thought he could walk like a common man. He would pass her stall, the man had said. That was the moment. No more than a second. Her target would be right in front of her. All she had to do was reach under her table and use what they gave her. One pull, one shot, a clean kill. Chaos would do the rest. And so Mariam waited, her heartbeat heavy in her chest, not out of fear but confusion. This wasn't the kind of woman she used to be. She had sold peppers for 15 years, raised 3 children alone, fought off hunger and war and silence. But the money, they had promised more than she had ever held. Enough to pay her debts, enough to send her daughter to school, enough to start over. That was the trap. Then she saw him. He wasn't what she expected. No gold watch, no suit. Just a plain white shirt, dusty shoes, and the calmest walk she'd ever seen. Ibrahim Trrowé strolled slowly through the market like a man at peace in his skin. He greeted old women, held babies, even tasted roasted groundnuts at the edge of a stall. When he reached hers, he smiled and said, "Bonjour, ma." His voice was soft, kind. He picked up a mango, turned it in his hand, and added, "This one's perfect." Mariam's fingers twitched under the table. She could feel the cold metal hidden beneath the cloth. He looked her in the eyes and added, "How's business today?" She froze. The mango slipped from his hand and rolled to the ground. He bent to pick it up. That's when it happened. A hand, not hers, reached from behind her stall, firm, strong. 2 men dressed like shoppers grabbed her arms before she could even blink. A third man reached under the table and pulled out the small pistol wrapped in black cloth. Gasps erupted. Shouts followed. The president stood quietly. His face didn't change. His eyes stayed locked on hers. Mariam dropped to her knees as the crowd began to scatter. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She just stared at the ground, the weight of what she almost did crashing down on her like a storm. Behind her, one of the men spoke into a radio. "Target secured. Weapon recovered. Attempt failed." The crowd didn't know what was happening yet. Only whispers. A few people saw the weapon. Others assumed a thief had been caught. But as the president stepped back and security gently encircled him, the truth spread like smoke. They had known. Weeks before, intelligence agents in Burkina Faso had intercepted a message. A plot. Paid by foreign interests threatened by Trrowé's. Reforms, land, gold, power, and a warning. Kill him while he walks like a poor man. But Trrowé had walked anyway. Knowing, watching, testing. Mariam was taken quietly. No shouting, no beatings, just silence. Trrowé stood near her and said, "I understand hunger. I understand desperation. But I will not let fear rule this land." He left the mango on her table and walked away. Later that night, the nation heard the news, the market, the attempt, the woman, But more than that, they heard how she was caught not by accident, but by a system the president had rebuilt from the hall. Inside, quiet watchers, protectors, people who didn't wear uniforms but stood ready. At her trial, Mariam told the truth about the money, about her children, about how she had once believed in the president but lost hope when her husband died and the world turned cold. The judge listened. The country watched. And Trrowé? He never spoke her name again. But a week later, her children were quietly enrolled in a school for presidential scholarship students. No announcement, no headline. Just a small act of mercy from a man who knew that justice must punish, but never forget to heal. Both justice and humanity. The story becomes a lesson in forgiveness, protection, and the quiet strength of African leadership. The interrogation room. Mariam sat alone in the cold grey room. Her hands were no longer tied, but her wrists carried the ghost of the cuffs. A camera blinked red in the corner. A fan spun slowly above her, creaking with every turn. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her eyes stared ahead, dry, empty. The door opened softly. A man entered, dressed not like a soldier, but in plain clothes. His steps were calm, measured. He placed a file gently on the table, sat across from her, and opened it. He didn't speak right away. He studied her face, like he was trying to read something written beneath her skin. Mariam Ouedraogo, he said finally. Mother of 3. Seller of mangoes. Widow. No criminal record. No history of violence. So why? She looked down. He continued, voice still quiet. You were given 15 million CFA francs, half up front, half promised after the job. Who gave it to you? She said nothing. He leaned forward. We're not here to destroy you, but we need to know who's behind this. Burkina Faso doesn't bow to ghosts in the shadows anymore. Still silence. He slid a photo across the table. A grainy image of a man in sunglasses, sitting at a hotel cafe. Mariam flinched slightly. Her fingers twitched. Tell me about him, the agent said. Mariam's lips parted. A whisper escaped. He promised me a new life. Whispers in the wind. The man in the photo was no stranger to Burkina Faso's intelligence network. He had gone, by many names, Jacques, Paul, even the architect among some foreign operatives. He was known for hiring locals to do foreign work, quiet work, dirty work. He had been spotted in Niger, Mali, even Chad. Always just before something exploded, literally or politically. Trrowé's reforms had shaken the table. His decision to nationalize gold, to limit foreign control over the nation's resources, had made him enemies far beyond Africa's borders. Not everyone wanted a strong, independent Burkina Faso. Some preferred a broken one, easy to control, easy to buy. Mariam had been caught in the crossfire, but she wasn't the only one. The web unravels. 3 days after the failed attempt, 5 more arrests were made. A hotel worker in Ouagadougou, a security contractor from Côte d'Ivoire, a foreign journalist with no press credentials. One by one, the pieces came together. Mariam's confession was just the beginning. In the National Intelligence Office, a whiteboard filled with names and photos told a larger story. Connections to a multinational mining corporation based in Paris. Evidence of shell companies. Transfers of funds through Dakar and Dubai, and always, always the same goal. Remove Trrowé. Quietly, quickly, without a trace. But now, they had failed. The president speaks on the 7th day. Ibrahim Trrowé addressed the nation. He stood on the steps of the presidential palace, no podium, no teleprompter. Just his voice. Burkina Faso, he said, my people. There are forces in this world who believe Africans can still be bought. That if you offer a mother enough money, she'll betray her land. That if you dangle comfort, we'll abandon our dignity. They were wrong. He paused. His gaze swept over the gathered crowd, the cameras, the silent city listening. They tried to use poverty as a weapon. They thought our struggle made us weak, but our struggle makes us unbreakable. And to those in boardrooms far from here planning our downfall, I have a message. We are no longer yours to command. This land belongs to its people. This future belongs to us. The crowd erupted. The plaza trembled with chants. Flags waved, women wept, children clapped. Something was shifting, not just in Burkina Faso, but across the continent. A wave was building. Mariam's fate behind prison walls. Mariam sat with a visitor, not a judge, not a lawyer. A woman dressed in white and blue, a teacher. She had brought papers with her, school forms, photos of Mariam's children, smiling, unaware of what their mother had nearly done. The president wanted you to see these, the woman said. He also wanted you to know your children are safe, and that they will be educated, free of charge. Mariam broke. Tears fell, heavy and silent, soaking the table between them. She shook her head. Why? Why would he do that? The woman replied gently. Because he knows your hands weren't built for violence. They were shaped by struggle, and he believes even broken hands can plant seeds again. The man in the shadows, but far away, in a quiet villa in Tunisia. The man in the sunglasses watched the president's speech on a laptop screen. He didn't flinch. He closed the lid, stood and made a single call, Phase 2. But this time, Burkina Faso was watching, and so was Ibrahim Trrowé, a dangerous alliance. In the weeks following the failed assassination attempt, the atmosphere in Ouagadougou had shifted. Ibrahim Trrowé had not only survived the plot, but he had also emerged as a symbol of strength and unity for the people of Burkina Faso. The country was no longer just reacting to the threats from outside. It was becoming more proactive, building internal resilience in the face of adversity. But, as with any revolution or uprising, those with power and interest to protect rarely give up easily. Deep in the heart of Europe, a clandestine meeting was taking place. A man who had once been a distant ally of Burkina Faso's government now found himself on the opposite side of the struggle. Jacques, or as he was known in certain circles, the architect, was sitting across from a group of influential figures in the mining and energy sectors. They were anxious, their faces obscured in shadows as they whispered in low tones. "The president is unyielding," Jacques said in French, his voice steady but carrying the weight of frustration. "He's made a statement that can't be undone. The people are with him. The gold reserves are under his control. If we don't act now, we'll lose everything." One of the men, a greying executive with a weathered face, nodded. "We've lost one battle, but we can't afford to lose this war. We need a way to remove him from power permanently. We can't afford another failure. The entire region is looking at us now." Jacques leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "We'll play it differently this time. We'll use the people he trusts, the ones closest to him. Disillusion them. Break his inner circle." The plan was set. It was a game of patience, a game of subtlety. No more grand gestures, no more flashy attempts at assassinations. This time, it would be quieter, more insidious. They had learned from the mistakes of their past actions. They would attack from within. The inside agent. The plan required someone who had been close to the president, someone who could slip under the radar and infiltrate the inner workings of the government. They needed a woman who was powerful enough to be trusted, yet unnoticed enough to blend into the shadows. That's when they found her. Amina, an ambitious young political aide who had risen quickly through the ranks, thanks to her intelligence and keen understanding of power dynamics. She had been working in the corridors of the presidential palace for years, assisting in diplomatic relations and internal affairs. The perfect candidate. Amina was approached in the dead of night. The voices on the other end of the phone were firm, convincing. They offered her wealth, safety, a new life far from the heat of politics. But all of that came with one price. She had to be willing to betray the president. Betrayal in plain sight. The offer was tempting. Amina was young, and though she had made a name for herself in the palace, she had longed for something more. She had grown tired of the endless cycle of political backstabbing, the power struggles that defined the daily life in the capital. Her ambition clouded her judgment. The words of the men from the shadows seemed like an escape from the monotony of her reality. She had been promised a seat at the table of power. Amina agreed to cooperate, but there was one condition. She demanded full control over the assassination plan. She was determined to make it as clean as possible, without raising suspicion. Amina was meticulous. She knew that if she failed, the consequences would be dire. But she was also aware that if she succeeded, she could rewrite the fate of Burkina Faso and her own. Days turned into weeks, and Amina's influence over certain ministers grew. She worked her way deeper into the heart of the administration, feeding information to Jacques and his group. At first, it was subtle. Small pieces of intelligence here and there, simple ways of undermining Trrové's authority. But over time, the stakes grew higher. Amina knew that she couldn't stop now, not when she was so close to her goal. The game turns, but as the old saying goes, power is never as stable as it appears. Amina underestimated one crucial thing: the strength of Ibrahim Trrové's intelligence network. Though she worked diligently to keep her betrayal hidden, the president was not blind to the shifts happening around him. One evening, as she sat at her desk in the palace, poring over documents, she received a visitor. It was a woman, an officer from the Presidential Guard. Amina's heart sank as the officer handed her a sealed envelope. "This is for you, from the president," the officer said, her voice impassive. "You are to report to the intelligence office immediately." Amina's pulse quickened. She could feel the walls closing in on her. She walked slowly, trying to maintain her composure, but the weight of the situation was too much. As she entered the office, she was greeted by a man from the Presidential Security Unit. He didn't speak. He simply gestured for her to sit. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Amina could feel the cold eyes of the security team on her. They didn't need to say anything. She already knew what was happening. She had been caught. "The unraveling. I hope you understand why you're here," the officer said quietly, sitting across from her. Amina swallowed hard. I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer's eyes remained cold. "You know, we've been watching you for a long time. We knew you were getting too close to people you shouldn't be, but we needed you to think you were winning. Now the question is, who were you working for?" Amina's mind raced. She knew her time had run out. It was no longer a question of avoiding detection. Now it was about saving herself. Her pride was gone. She had no leverage, no bargaining chips. The only thing left to do was confess. I was hired," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "By Jacques, the foreign businessman. He promised me a future." Facing the truth, as Amina's confession unfolded, the full scope of the plot began to come to light. The intelligence network had already pieced together the pieces, but hearing her words confirmed their worst fears. The conspiracy wasn't just about one man. It was part of a broader effort to destabilize Burkina Faso. It was part of a larger plan to take back control of Africa's resources and to remove any leader who stood in the way. But the most shocking part of it all was the fact that Amina, someone so close to the president, had been the one to pull the strings. The very woman who had been trusted with high-level information had sold out her country for the promise of wealth and power. The public revelation. The truth came to light in a televised broadcast. Ibrahim Trrowé addressed the nation once more, this time with a steely calm that conveyed the gravity of the situation. "The people who attempted to divide us," he said, "thought that they could use us as pawns in their games. They thought we could be bribed, bought, and betrayed. But they were wrong. We are a nation of dignity, a nation of strength." As the broadcast concluded, the camera cut to Amina, now in handcuffs, her face a mask of shame and regret. The nation watched in silence as the woman who had once held the trust of the president was led away. A nation unbroken, Burkina Faso's resolve had been tested once again, but the people stood firm. The president had survived yet another attempt on his life, but this time the victory was sweeter, not because of his personal triumph, but because of the nation's resilience. The plot against him had failed, but the true lesson was that the spirit of the people could not be broken. For Amina, there was no escape from the consequences of her actions. She had betrayed the very people who had once trusted her, and now she would face the punishment for her treason. But for Ibrahim Trrowé, this was not a time for retribution. It was a time to build, to continue his work of national unity, economic independence, and empowerment for the people of Burkina Faso. The forces that tried to tear his country apart had underestimated its strength, and now the world would see the consequences of trying to bend Africa to foreign interests. The storm had passed, but the winds of change were only beginning, a shifting battlefield. Though Amina was in custody and the plot had been exposed, President Ibrahim Trrowé knew the battle was far from over. He sat quietly in his private office late into the night, surrounded by silence. The weight of leadership pressed heavier now. Each attack, each betrayal, made one truth increasingly clear. Burkina Faso's fight for sovereignty wasn't just political or military. It was psychological, spiritual, and deeply systemic. He knew his enemies had grown smarter. They would no longer risk bold moves like bombs in markets or obvious assassins. No, they had shifted tactics, aiming for the hearts and minds of his people, exploiting their frustrations, poverty, and doubts. If they couldn't kill the leader, they would try to turn the people against him. Whispers in the streets in the weeks that followed, a new kind of warfare began. Rumors spread like wildfire. Anonymous pamphlets were left in mosques and marketplaces. Fake news sites sprang up overnight, spewing propaganda accusing Trrowé of hoarding wealth, silencing dissent, and planning to hand over the country to military control. Social media was flooded with deep-fake videos showing him making inflammatory speeches he never gave. The campaign was effective. Protests began to appear in certain provinces, small at first, but growing in size. Some were genuine frustrations, villages that hadn't yet seen the benefits of the national reforms. Others were clearly orchestrated. Foreign agents posing as activists agitated crowds, handed out burner phones, and paid young men to riot. Ibrahim's advisors were split. Some wanted to impose curfews, shut down social media, and arrest protest leaders. Others warned that such measures would only confirm the lies being told about him, but Ibrahim Trrowé was calm. "If we become what they accuse us of," he said during a cabinet meeting, "then we've already lost. This isn't just about controlling a narrative. This is about reminding our people who we are, why we fight, why we suffer, and who truly benefits when we fall." A secret weapon, the voice of the people. Rather than silencing the unrest, Trrowé launched a bold and risky campaign of transparency. He began holding town hall meetings, broadcast live across the nation. He traveled without his usual armored convoy to rural provinces, walking the streets without bodyguards, speaking directly to farmers, women, students. "Ask me anything," he'd say, standing beneath mango trees or outside small clinics. "You've heard the rumors. You've read the lies. Ask me what's true." At first, the sessions were tense. Angry citizens accused him of broken promises. But Trrowé never flinched. He answered every question with clarity, even when the truth was painful. "We don't have enough medicine yet," he said to one nurse, "in Bobo Dioulasso. But the reason is because our deals with foreign pharmaceutical companies were traps. We're building our own now. We will suffer, yes, but it will be ours." These raw, unscripted dialogues slowly began to cut through the fog of misinformation. People shared clips of the meetings. Memes began to appear. Images of Trrowé walking dusty roads next to villagers with captions like "Le Président de la Rue," the street president. His popularity began to surge again, not because of propaganda, but because of authenticity. An offer. He had to refuse, but the shadow forces behind the plots were not idle. Jacques returned, this time with a new offer. It came through an intermediary, an African businessman from Ghana with connections across the continent. He requested a discreet private meeting. Out of caution, Trrowé arranged it in a neutral location, under strict observation. The Ghanaian envoy was smooth, charming. "They know they can't kill you," he said frankly. "So they want to buy you. They offer you a seat at their table. Billions in development funds, new infrastructure deals, foreign security contracts. All you need to do is allow some strategic control over the gold mining operations. Nothing drastic. A partnership." Ibrahim narrowed his eyes. "And what happens when I refuse?" The envoy smiled. "Then I suppose we'll see just how much more your people can take before they turn on you." The betrayal of a general. Just as the nation began to stabilize, another tremor struck. General Karim Ouedraogo, one of Trrowé's most trusted military advisors, was caught in a sting operation, caught receiving encrypted messages from a foreign intelligence agency. It was a shock. Karim had been at Trrowé's side since the revolution. Under interrogation, he confessed that he had been promised control over the defense ministry and international asylum if he agreed to back a coup from within. The revelation sent shockwaves across the military. Trrowé acted swiftly, removing several high-ranking officers and replacing them with younger, fiercely loyal commanders who had fought alongside him in the early days. But the damage was done. Doubt crept back into the ranks, a vision reaffirmed. But Trrowé didn't let the betrayal slow him. He doubled down on his vision. A new wave of economic programs was launched, this time fully decentralized. Instead of funneling aid through the capital, he created regional councils made up of local farmers, midwives, and teachers to manage budgets and oversee projects directly. He also announced an ambitious new plan, a Pan-African economic bloc independent of foreign banks. This would allow regional trade in local currencies, with a shared reserve backed not by the IMF, but by gold, cocoa, and lithium deposits controlled by member nations. Leaders in Mali, Guinea, and Niger expressed interest. Secret meetings were held. A new alliance was quietly forming. Enemies within, enemies without. Seeing this progress, international opposition intensified. Sanctions were threatened. Human rights organizations, some legitimate, others funded by intelligence fronts, issued damning reports. Trrowé was called a populist, a tyrant, a demagogue. He responded with calm resolve. "If being a tyrant means refusing to sell my country's soul, then I accept your title." And then, another blow. A bomb exploded outside the Ministry of Agriculture. 6 were killed. Investigations revealed a network of paid saboteurs connected to the same group that had funded Amina. The nation grieved, but did not break. And this time, ordinary citizens took it upon themselves to protect public buildings, to report suspicious activity. In a small village outside Koudougou, a group of young men tackled a foreign agent caught planting a device. They handed him over to the gendarmerie with a single message: "Tell your bosses we're not for sale." The war behind the curtain. Trrowé knew now what he truly faced. This wasn't just about gold. This was a war between two worldviews. One where Africa remained a pawn in the hands of global empires, and one where it stood tall, messy, complicated, but free. And in this war, the battlefield was not just land. It was memory, pride, history, identity. It was the ability of a people to look in the mirror and say, "We are enough." As the next chapter of the struggle approached, President Ibrahim Trrowé looked out over the capital from his balcony. The sun was rising over Ouagadougou. Children laughed in the distance. Somewhere, someone was plotting. But somewhere else, someone was organizing, resisting, dreaming. He smiled faintly. Let them come. Burkina Faso was ready.